Welcome to this episode of the ElectroNeek Podcast, where we bring you the latest information in RPA and tell you how you can build, sell, and support your automation service business. So let's jump right into it.
So I was really excited for this conversation, Dmitry, because it occurred to me that we literally hadn't done this for 2 years, and it made my head explode that the last time we sat down and did our look forward to the future vis-a-vis what's happening in the present conversation, it was a different world. It really, really was. And some of the things we spoke about last time 2 years ago were, what is the world going to look like when automation becomes mainstream for companies outside the enterprise? And fast forward 2 years, and without, I think, anyone even realizing it, this big, massive elephant in the room, or cyborg in the room, as it were, is GPT is but a form of automation, and it's now effectively gone mainstream almost overnight. And I saw the craziest stat ever, which almost harkens back to the early days of RPA in the enterprise. Something like 60% of CEOs have gone on record right now as saying they would replace a person with GPT in their organization immediately, and or are already doing it. And that is absolutely staggeringly incredible. We went from effectively automation becoming future technology that people in companies were thinking about adopting or doing measured adoption, to this now becoming commonplace down to SMBs in almost the snap of a finger. And some of these use cases that I'm seeing and I'm hearing from even non-technical individuals are leveraging some of the most sophisticated forward-looking technology in some of the most almost mundane applications, yet that are saving themselves massive amounts of time and energy and efficiency. And we're in this crazy innovation period that feels like the future is now. And it's this amazing, I know you always speak about the next industrial revolution. Well, I think it's almost happened already. Right before our eyes. I think we're there.
I'm thinking about this summer as a time when a lot of young college grads who got used to use ChatGPT in their school this year for, many reasons how ChatGPT can be used in higher educational institutions will go to their internships and they will bring all this, hacks for their work to the job. And that will be pretty much happening every other month. It's interesting how academia now, maybe not by design, but gets to the point when people who build their practical skills of getting real value from conversational AI, from pretty much any applications of AI, are already equipped to use the job. Like, I cannot imagine my own life without having ChatGPT bot in our Slack. And
already in the space of a couple of weeks, it's now become indispensable and something that all of us are leveraging for the everyday almost overnight. And it's incredible. And it made me think about the early days of the internet and some of the critique of some of the generations that have come up with the internet. And I think you and I are both pretty fortunate in that we're in that transient generation that grew up in analog world, and the world turned digital as we were coming up through our educational processes. And on one hand, I consider myself really fortunate. On the other hand, I think it's absolutely mind-blowing the potential of rapid human evolution here. With a tool of this sophistication, what is work transformed into? So Internet V1, you no longer as a human have to serve as a repository for raw knowledge and information, because of course Google is the master repository of knowledge, and you can search and you can access information. What is ChatGPT, an evolution of this? It's now a synthesis and a combination and conclusion drawing mechanism from information. So the skill then no longer becomes knowledge sourcing or even knowledge recombination. The skill is in the prompt and the direction and the application of that knowledge. And that's something brand new, because traditional skill has been those two things now that are now effectively being outsourced to machines. If the machines have the knowledge and the machines can actually grant knowledge and explicit direction on how to solve a problem, what's the role of the human in that world? And that's what I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah, and software is eating the world, and AI, specifically the conversational AI, is eating the software. it's very interesting to me now to see, I tend to compare in our previous conversations, I think I used that a new wave of automation technologies to what Microsoft Excel brought to the industries like accounting, like finance in 90s. And I always thinking about people who actually were creating macros. That time it was very common, I think in 90s and early 2000s, that in each team and each group that works heavily with Microsoft Excel, there are a couple of people who are self-educated to automate the work. And these people became very valuable. And I think that, not sure how exactly they capitalized on that career-wise, but in terms of if you are a manager and you have 10 people and 2 of them actively using technology to automate any work that others do manually, you probably would bet on these people and promote them and so on. And these are not people who were educated, trained specifically to automate work. And we will see that here and there. Some people call it citizen developers. As we've learned from our PA journey, of our own journey, that even bigger change happens when these people make automation their profession and they start to deliver that as a service and make money on that. Traditionally, people were doing that in technology with high IT skills. What skills will be really required to build powerful automations with AI? And I think that ChatGPT now may look like, okay, it saves time, but on the practical examples, you can just do that without ChatGPT. But it's interesting how these cases are being built. And the point I want to make that ChatGPT lowers a lot the barrier for people to create really valuable automations. And the barrier cannot be only skill, but just time it takes to do something. Just before our meeting, I spent some time with the team. We looked at some examples of how ChatGPT creates reminders for customers, for prospects, for late invoice, paid and so on, any kind of reminders. What does it mean to automate a reminder to your client, for instance? It usually means creating a logic, then writing some template, using the logic to pick up the right template, populate template with data, and that you have a reminder. And with ChatGPT, you just write down, create a reminder for XYZ based on this data we have in our automated workflow, invoice date, for instance.
And I think that's amongst the most interesting things right now. Not to anthropomorphize tech too much, but even the simplest of interfaces, and ElectroNeek, of course, what are we focused on? Low code and no code. It's still a development environment, and that's still intimidating even for the citizen developer to have to go into a development environment and develop. But what is ChatGPT? That's a hyper-standardized interface that's become commonplace of the chatbot. And whether or not individuals are treating it as a human, that's an interface that's easily accessible, easily consumable, and something that individuals are extremely comfortable doing is a back and forth call and response. It's being consumed everywhere. And I think the net overall impact is, what is ChatGPT as an LLM? Yes, I won't downplay the sophistication. There's a lot of nuts and bolts going on in the background of that. But effectively, in and of itself, of course, it's a form of automation. It's a large database, and there's an algorithm that's driving a response, searching a data set. Now, the super interesting part is we've gone from relatively background or back of the house technology in RPA and hyperautomation, whether it's IDP or process discovery, now all of a sudden becoming front of the house, and any business of any size in their beginning of consumption of ChatGPT is now discovering the power of automation. And I think in this really interesting way, some of this crazy forward-looking technology that's easy to consume is actually going to drive the adoption of some of the more, I don't want to say legacy, because I still don't think RPA and or hyperautomation or intelligent automation is legacy. But I think this parallel technology of the traditional B2B-oriented intelligent automation path is now going to become much more commonplace because there's an understanding and an acceptance of consumption of automation technology. That's what's really interesting to me, is that we now have virtually overnight tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of companies that weren't consuming automation, now consuming automation in their processes. They're using automation to communicate with their customers. They're using automations to save time, or potentially even replace work where they couldn't afford to hire an employee to do some of this additional work that's being done.
So going back to these reminders, and we had discussion internally about this. Okay, you need to send a reminder. Normally you can write a template. You don't need to call ChatGPT for that. But let's say you want to be more efficient from an automation perspective. When you send reminders about late invoices, typically you change the tone of your communication later, the past date. And we literally live played with saying, okay, take invoice past due date, and based on that, send a polite,
and a sternly worded reminder.
Polite by angry, very angry reminder, and so on. It took us like 3 minutes to upgrade the bot that sends a reminder to the bot that sends a reminder with different tone of voice, depending on the goal, pretty much. Is it small, late due, or short due or long due? So the point is, if it's so easy to build, and if people with very low skill can build, who is going to write these templates to communications anymore? No one, because it doesn't make any sense. And
right.
I don't think we will witness any big increase in the cost of this technology and practical cost of this technology to people. So what does it mean today for, let's say, for Americans? You say you receive a reminder on something. I think that you realize it's unlikely a real person send you that email, even today, unless you deal with very, very small business. Just likely a template or something like this. I feel now with seeing this small example increasing in complexity with the ease of tweaking a few words, that most of communications you will receive from businesses in the country will be generated by ChatGPT. Not because it's efficient to compare to templates. It's just so convenient to build them and to customize them in any way and modify them in 5 minutes compared to hours. I think I have a good analogy for those who never automated a workflow in a software environment. Imagine that you have a robot as a lawn mower. So you need to mow and mow. And in the past, with RPA in early days, it would sound like, okay, robot, go to a tree on your left, take 270-degree turn, then go 10 feet up and whatever. Now we got to the point where to create the same task for this robot, you just need to tell you, okay, there's a lawn in front of the house, mow it, go. And that's pretty much what we witness now in terms of the workflow automation. Becoming less steps, each step become much more complex because it's pretty much a machine learning embedded everywhere. And to any automation developer out there who's listening to us, I think it means that that's time to understand what in the long run will be differentiation here.
So yeah, there's so many interesting implications. Let's come at it from the other angle, of course, because on one hand, this is a very overlapping on the Venn diagram topic to some of the automation for business cases idea. On the other hand, it still is far away because it's not an omnipotent tool. It's still a database that effectively has challenges interacting with the outside world. It's in stasis, relatively speaking. So I think the most interesting thing for it, although of course it feels like magic. What was that? Was that an Arthur C. Clarke quote? I always forget. Indistinguishable from technology, right? So the main idea here, I think that's really interesting probably to our audience is, okay, GPT has almost overnight gone mainstream. Well, what does that mean as I see it? It means that even without necessarily understanding it, individuals have now become dramatically, if not exponentially, more open to automation of work, because that's what they're doing. But the practical use case for a business to leverage ChatGPT to create a fully automated workflow within their normal day-to-day operations is still relatively minimal. There are many practical applications, but most of them are within the realm of writing a communication to another human. That is by far the biggest use case that I'm seeing out in the world, is that, as you mentioned, so many emails virtually overnight started becoming generated by ChatGPT. But the use case to put these into practical use by a company, there is still another layer of this to integrate this into a workflow and a process and a human being to do this business analysis that simply is not possible by ChatGPT, as well as the triggering, the invoking, and the additional steps that ChatGPT can't handle, because ChatGPT, of course, I mean, that would be Skynet, right? It can't interact with your desktop. It can't interact with your servers. It can't interact with your databases or your CRM. And in order to do these things, I think the immediate market opportunity is that GPT has become this effective gateway drug. So one of the things that I speak to a lot of the entrepreneurs that we deal with on a regular basis is, how do I get the word out about this thing? People are interested, but they're not necessarily fully understanding what this can do for them. I think that's effectively been solved for overnight. Our analogy has been written for us. What GPT is doing, you can now build for them in other areas and create the extensibility layer in that they're now open and amenable to these kinds of things because the barrier has been brought down and they got to try something and understand it and the power of automation itself. But the practical application, of course, is so limited without taking this and having the professional thought process and the professional architecture to make it a usable, monetizable, and or money-saving machine. That, I think, is the immediate market opportunity that is so exciting right now, is that barrier to entry to break into this market has been so lowered because people are now automating.
That's right. And remember the college grads who will contribute considerably to this trend. Agents of change.
They're doing it.
To me, here I see two agents of change, essentially. The first one are college grads themselves that go to any job and become their essentially citizen developers. But the second big contribution will be from entrepreneurs who will take these people and say, okay, now can I have access to those who can automate pretty powerful things for less than I expected, much less. By the way, I recently looked at jobs report on like what people typically pay now for RPA developers in the States, and I was shocked to see the numbers still above 100K. With everything happening in terms of technology developments.
I think that's a good sign. I actually am not that surprised because it's still a separate realm. And I think for our service providers, that's quite actually a good thing. You might think, oh, I still have to pay a lot for these people. But if you have to pay a lot for these people, the world has still put a high level of value on the work that RPA/intelligent automation brings, and that's a good thing. GPT right now, it's accessible and it's quote unquote free, even though it's massively powerful and magical seeming. But to turn this into something that helps a business derive value is still something we have to pay for as a company doing it, and therefore something that we can charge for. I think that's a good thing. And I don't think it's that surprising in that it's still a skill and not something, and that kind of goes back to one of our earlier points, right? GPT does something really, really interesting and powerful, but can your average small business take that and start to automate their business workflows? Not at all. They can do a little piece of it. And the work in order to do that needs to come from these developers that are not commoditized. They're doing valuable work. And of course, your local Main Street business can't hire a 100K developer, but can they purchase an automation for $5K a year on a subscription basis from their local service provider? Sure.
Yeah, we need here, in general, I think that in each new technology that has the business impact, once it emerges, we probably spoke about this mantra a lot, enterprise first, then service. Why I think the pattern will repeat here again and again. People, when discuss, and I attended a couple of events with CTOs of other RP vendors. When we discuss the future, there's a lot about self-build and automation. When you can just tell your computer, do this 1,000 times, the computer stitches the workflow itself and does things. Even with all the opportunities that GPT models give us, I don't think we will get to the point where this will be the major way to deliver automation in years and years to come. And it means that for those who are entrepreneurial and can hire people with still low but higher than average IT skill or technology skill in general, will be able to succeed in selling the automation as a service. And the skill set, I think, of this future automation developer is not defined yet. There's a lot of conversations about, okay, how you formulate requests to AI, to conversational AI is very important to be an effective conversational AI developer. Yeah. That skill definitely will go up. I don't think it's on the CV of anyone who wants to work in IT service, but definitely it will come very, very, very soon.
Yeah. So I think some of the really interesting pieces for this are that there's a massive market opportunity right now. And I'm speaking with a lot of our current customers who are out there in the world doing this, and they're seeing it too, in that there's a lot they can do, not only in being able to sell them RPA or sell them automation as a service, but integrate some of these technologies that they have some familiarity with. Like they're using GPT. Cool. That's just one small piece of what you can do. It's still manually invoked. So a lot of these businesses are manually invoking, and they may have a person that receives an email, and then they open up GPT and they type a combination of prompts to get to something. But the sophistication of what can be done there when combining the readily available technology, I mean, think even IDP, right? You can take something as mundane as a stack of invoices and scanning those and doing things with them after you've gotten a scanned document, to getting a scanned invoice, having automatic recognition that this is an invoice. All of this becomes structured data. The computer knows, and the algorithm knows what the fields are, understands that this customer is late, sends a prompt to GPT that says, hey, do me a favor, give me a sternly worded email because this customer is 10 days late on a response, and does it instantaneously. That's really cool forward-looking stuff that's available right now, as opposed to the human just barely scratching the surface and having a nice email written by themselves. That's cool, and that's a massive market opportunity that can be taken advantage of right now.
Sam Altman, president of OpenAI, recently shared that one of the most fascinating use of ChatGPT for him is when people write bullet points for communications that ask ChatGPT to create a more, let's say, detailed emails, more polite emails, more let's break. And then the receiver of this email looks at that and uses ChatGPT to create bullet points out of that because they want to consume the essence.
Yep.
And
yeah, it's so interesting. Did you catch what Salesforce and Slack are doing with GPT? It just hit the wire, I think, yesterday. If you didn't see it, it's really cool. They're now going full bore with Slack GPT integration. And I think it's still in beta and it's closed, but they're going to actually use GPT to look at conversations and do the same thing, actually bulletize conversations and or analyze previous conversations. So if you're going into a meeting with someone, this is the example they used. They showed a bullet suggestion from ChatGPT that says, hey, this person you're going into a meeting with recently joined the company and they're likely going to want to talk to you about X. How cool is that?
Yeah. One other way that I think many in our community, many companies or individuals are a bit overlooking in this moment is logical automation is getting affected a lot by ability to use code generated with ChatGPT. Why it's so important? We typically, when we do our routine, we do not notice how complex the logic is, because for humans in general, logic is a simple thing. A very traditional programming task is create an algorithm to sort out fish in a bucket by size or something like this. And it takes a couple of lines of code and kids competing in different tournaments who can create the most elegant and powerful logic essentially for doing something. And for humans, it's easy. And for machines, they need to have the logic. And however no code you make your platform for automation, if every step does something, you still need to program the logic of things. And tasks like classification, tasks like sorting things out, putting them in order, doing some bulk operations with custom logic, they always required whatever your no-code skills are. You need to pick up a basic programming language and just write it down what you want a robot to do. And you still need to do it with ChatGPT, but instead of having any knowledge of the algorithms or best practices there or knowledge of specific logical operations, you just explain to the machine what you as a human individual, as a human being want to do. And for us, it becomes an area of investments. We realize now that no code is not only about how many no code activities you do have inside your automation tool or how powerful these steps are themselves. It also being able to automate the logic, the things that connects everything together.
Interesting point. So no code almost becomes this human computer interface paradigm rather than just a set of interfaces going in. I think that's interesting because that's how GPT can start to influence companies like us as OEM software makers, is that instead of even no code activities, it's language directed activities. Tell the software what you want to do. And the magic is there's some comprehension of language into computer driven output and creation. It's really, really interesting concept. So
Right. But I want to make a point here that, again, just being able to formulate the task and get the practical value from automation will be a legit way to automate, but likely very discrete tasks.
Yep.
And to make money on that in the market and become a professional, you need to know how to connect all these small things together and how to formulate these tasks in a way that will build efficient, sustainable automations that don't require maintenance or don't require much maintenance. I think that's what everyone wants. And for the service providers, that is an opportunity, I think, for the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely. I think GPT has just lowered the barrier and has brought automation to the mainstream. And there's a lot of technologies that have been fringe mainstream, right? Like you have some of the home automation tech, like if this, then that, right? Which to run your lights and create automations that say, hey, when I pull into my driveway, turn my living room lights on and preheat my oven. Cool, right? Fringe mainstream stuff. But now you have individuals that couldn't have even begun to tell you what they would even think about automating before. Now automating, while a small, still an automated piece of their workflow and replacing human activity with robot-directed activity. That's remarkable. And this has now opened the barrier, exactly as you've said. That in and of itself is a form of automation, but it's certainly not the intelligent automation that the service provider can sell that truly does add efficiencies, save money, save time, and help a business. But the door is now open. And I agree with you. For the next 3 to 5 years, exactly like Gartner and Forrester are saying, there is a massive amount of dry powder out there, tens, 20s of billions of dollars that companies will spend on this. And I think we're off the starting line. That money is now willing to be spent because some of the power of what this can do is being felt in the real world. So I think that existential question that I hear a lot is, well, how do I sell this to people? How do I convince them? That's being done for you now. 90% of the people you speak with have now felt the power of automation, and your opportunity is to take that and connect the dots to them and show them the true power of harnessing that into a real automated workflow. And that's what I think is so captivating about this market opportunity right now.
Get to say more than agree on that. It's not like, this is the big point, that there's fundamental shift in understanding of what, let's say, intelligent automation can do for the end user. There is fundamental opportunity to showcase things very quickly and practically. Not a theoretical example, but you can show the client something that uses ChatGPT to achieve their real business value in a matter of like a day to build a small POC. But I think many of, like in our audience, at least in my conversations with a lot of owners and CEOs of managed service providers, there is still missing component. Okay, demand increases. Ability to capitalize on that is here. But the practical confidence of, can I sell a conversational AI automation project to a client, that still requires to be built. And I think it's a process where there's no, just go in and try selling something that you haven't delivered in the past is hard. It's very hard, quite frankly. And we were inspiring a generation of IT service providers to go and try to sell automation while historically they were delivering different services. And we know that many of them are successful, but we know how hard it is to start a new service. We know how big is that decision. But you can start doing that internally for your own benefit. And these benefits, quite frankly, are here. If you work with tickets, for instance, analyzing tickets, finding commonalities between tickets, these are communications that are frequently happen between you and your clients. You can put ChatGPT on that today and doesn't require that much skill. It should help you to build internal confidence. And also, you do have some practical cases to start selling to clients directly. We recently did a campaign and said, build a bot for your boss. What was the campaign about? ChatGPT can summarize articles well. What it cannot do, it cannot feed URL. You cannot feed URL in ChatGPT to get the answer right now. But with RPA bot, you can. So if you are a developer, let's say a junior developer in a company, you can ask your boss of what things they read on a periodic basis. Let's say 10 blogs, list them, create URLs for them. You can write a bot that goes there on some frequent basis, twice a day, once a day, checks for new articles, summarizes them, creates email with bullet points, sends it to your boss. Does it have practical value? Yes, for your boss, it has practical value. I can bet on that. Is it hard to build? No. This bot takes 3-4 hours to build it maximum. Does it increase confidence of your organization to deliver and sell that as a service to clients? Yes, it does. Will you be selling this exact bot to clients? No. But you will sell them for the third missing component.
One never knows. I heard about a not dissimilar use case, and I'm starting to hear about things that we would have thought were science fiction even a year ago. Is some of the new technologies on the market of text to speech are doing things like, I know of a similar use case in production out there in the world. Take a whole bunch of different articles, ask ChatGPT to synthesize these articles, then create a conversation between two people about these articles, feed out to some of the other commercial services that are available that can take that text to voice and turn it into a highly convincing, even a podcast that was now fully created by robots virtually instantaneously. So, I mean, that sounds like science fiction. That's human-driven work even a couple of months ago. Synthesize, talk about, report, broadcast. That's not robot or automation-driven activity, and it now is virtually overnight. So some of these use cases are highly creative, and I think that crosses over to the role of the human being in all of this. There's still a lot of human evangelism for the art of the possible. A robot cannot do that. ChatGPT is not going to go to your customers and tell them what they should automate. It's still human prompted activity. And some of your current customers, they don't know what they should automate. And that's a massive area for opportunity is what do they have now? Well, they have some willingness to actually automate things because they're playing with it themselves and there's a friendly face on it. Do they know exactly what they should? No, but the world is your oyster now to actually begin building out these use cases or building on other use cases and developing what, again, looked impossible even a couple of months ago. That's cool.
Let's flip the table in the end to the consumers of automation, because I think it's really, it's again, a common topic in our discussions with you about like what's entrepreneurship of future looks like with all the automation opportunities. And I'd like to build an analogy. Let's take a look at e-commerce business. Let's say that e-commerce business can be considered a business of the future 15, 20 years ago. So how typically it started? Someone builds a site, a website. Okay, not in early days of e-commerce, but in Shopify age. You just go and as an entrepreneur yourself, you build foundations of your business yourself with all the automations and infrastructure and maybe even payment processing and so on. Once you scale up, you likely will ditch like a website that you build yourself or maybe the platform for something that supports your business needs. You now work with supply chains, you have scale, you have logistics, you start hiring people, you start buying software, you start automating that work. I think that e-commerce experience for new entrepreneurs will be just experience for all new entrepreneurs of the future. You can be able to start a business and achieve a lot as a solo entrepreneur, but just using things that are either out of the box or requires minimal configuration, including the conversational AI, because any business is about communicating with prospects, customers, any other stakeholders. So we can say that to a certain degree, these communications will be automated. So I think starting your business in the future will be not build your website on your own using drag and drop. It will be build your business on your own, having drag and drop. Will you be able to scale up and become a big, mid-market player on that? No. For that, you will need to start to do two things. First of all, hire someone who will expand your automation capabilities in terms of doing more complex things. These are service providers. And only then you hire people because they definitely will be the most expensive in this schema.
Yeah, and I think there's another really interesting element of that. And we could speak for hours on what entrepreneurship is. But I think in every entrepreneur, there's a vision of what the future is. And they inevitably see themselves as the tip of the spear propagating this future out into the world. And that's very much where we are right now. And I think one of those entrepreneurial traps, and you see all the scams online, like in the heyday of when drop shipping was brand new, it was, hey, buy this business in a box and set up your own drop shipping business by just pressing a single button. And of course that doesn't work, but they're building blocks to build something. Can you build $1 million business with those tools? Absolutely. But there's still human work and a significant amount of human work required. And I think that's the point that I would end on and was thinking about. this isn't automation taking over the world. This is automation providing significant advantages to the humans that are doing the work right now. And that's the humans that are consuming your automations are going to be able to do things that potentially they didn't even think possible automation could do for them years ago. And you as a business can now deliver things that you didn't even think would have been possible for you to deliver, but you still have to build and work. And this is not automation is going to enable you to build a $10 million MSP by just pressing a button. Not at all. It's your human innovation and your idea of what that future is that's going to enable you to go grab it. But man, the tools have gotten a whole lot better and a whole lot smarter in the past couple of months.
How should we close this? If you are a service provider and you're not delivering intelligent automation to your clients, go and hire now. But don't hire from the enterprise. Hire college grads. The automation becomes as easy as never it was before. It's your opportunity. It would not be here for that much time, but enough time to build a sustainable business.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the ElectroNeek Podcast.